You eat, you breathe, but you're just a rotting burden in this house. She screamed that while slamming her cup to the floor, hot coffee spraying my legs like acid. My son, he kept eating, and in that silence, I stopped being a mother and started becoming something else. I'm Shirley, 72. And somehow I've become the kind of woman people pretend not to see, even in her own home. I had made breakfast that morning like I always do. My right hip still ached from the surgery a month ago, but I moved slowly and quietly, slicing apples thinly, stirring oatmeal with cinnamon, and arranging everything like I used to when Robert was still a boy. He used to say I made the best scrambled eggs in all of Tennessee. Now he just eats them without looking up. I'd just set the table when Victoria, my daughter-in-law, stomped into the kitchen with her usual huffing. She didn't greet me. She never does. Instead, she yanked out a chair, dumped her plate on the table, and made sure every sound she made was sharp, punishing. The kind that says, "You're not welcome here." I gently pushed a napkin closer to her plate. Her head snapped toward me, face twisted in disgust. That's when she said it. Loud, cruel, as if I were less than a dog. You eat, you breathe, but you're just a rotting burden in this house. She grabbed her cup of coffee and slammed it against the floor. The liquid shot out, splattering across the tiles, my legs, my slippers. The heat of it stung like fire, but the sting in my chest was worse. My mouth opened, but no words came, just silence. Humiliation sat heavy on my skin, thicker than the coffee soaking into my pants. "I didn't mean to bother," I began, but she cut me off. "You don't help, you don't earn, you just take. I'm sick of you breathing our air." I bent down slowly, reaching for a cloth. I didn't know what else to do. Cleaning made me feel human. As I dabbed at the floor, she ripped the rag from my hands and tossed it in the sink. "Leave it. Someone useful will do it later." Then came the worst part. Robert walked in. My son, my only child. The boy I raised through flu seasons and skinned knees. The man I helped send to college by selling my wedding band. He walked right past the coffee, past the mess, past me. He sat down, picked up his fork, took a bite. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He just muttered, almost under his breath, "Victoria, just eat." That was it. He didn't look at me. He didn't touch my hand. He didn't say a single word to his mother, who had just been burned, insulted, and humiliated. Victoria scoffed. "She's not my mother, and this isn't her house." I turned toward Robert. My eyes, still wet from the sting, pleaded with him. Even a glance of kindness would have been enough. He stared at his plate. "Not now, Mom," he mumbled. "Please." That's when I realized something I'd refused to admit for far too long. In their eyes, I wasn't Shirley anymore. I wasn't the woman who built this family brick by brick. I wasn't even Robert's mother. I was a ghost, a thing, a weight they didn't want to carry. I pushed my chair back, slowly, quietly. My joints cracked, my pride cracked harder. Without a word, I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. I didn't turn back. No one called after me, and when I reached my room, I did something I'd never done before. I closed the door, and I locked it. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I stood by the door I had just locked and listened. Plates clinking, chairs shifting, laughter that didn't include me. It was like I was already gone, and nobody noticed. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked down at the coffee-stained hem of my pants. The burn on my leg had left a red mark, angry and raw, but there was no ointment in this house. No one had even asked if I was okay. I shuffled to the bathroom, opened the drawer with trembling hands, and tore a piece of gauze from the box. I washed the burn slowly, wincing at the sting, then wrapped it in silence. That silence, it was louder than Victoria's scream. It said, "You don't matter." I sat back on the bed, staring at nothing, just breathing, just existing. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I was just breathing and taking up space. The thought made me shiver, not from the cold, but from something darker. Something like shame. I reached for the nightstand drawer, pulled it open, and found the one thing that had stayed with me through every move, every decade. A silver chain with a tiny faded locket. It was George's gift to me on our 10th anniversary. Inside was a photo, him in his flannel shirt, smiling like the world hadn't broken yet. George, my husband, the man who built this house, with his hands, with his sweat, with love. He'd always called this place our fortress. I remembered him laughing, saying, "If they don't respect you in this house, Shirley, they don't belong in it, and for God's sake, never sign anything without reading it." I smiled a little, even through the pain. His voice had that power. It's strange how the dead can still hold you up when the living try to tear you down. The house we lived in wasn't bought, it was built. Every wooden beam had a memory. The kitchen cabinet he accidentally installed upside down. The crack in the living room floor we never fixed because Robert learned to walk on it. I gave up so much to keep this family together. My nursing school acceptance, my paintings, my little dreams. All shelved so Robert could have his. Now I couldn't even have a chair at the table without being made to feel like garbage. I glanced at the photo of George again. Was this what we sacrificed for? That thought sat heavy on my chest. I dragged myself toward the old trunk at the foot of the bed. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were papers, photos, the kind of things everyone says they'll sort through someday. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a reason, maybe an anchor. Then I saw it, tucked between old utility bills and Christmas cards. A leather folder, worn at the edges. George's handwriting on the tab, Land House Will. My heart skipped. I opened it slowly. Inside were documents I barely remembered seeing. The deed, the title, and something else, a draft of a transfer agreement. George had prepared to secure everything in case something happened. There were places for signatures, his was there, but mine, blank. I blinked, then blinked again. It was blank. That meant the land, the house, everything was still in my name. The breath I took in that moment was the first real breath I'd had in weeks, maybe months. Suddenly, I wasn't just some invisible old woman anymore. I was the owner of this house, the land beneath it, the hallway they walk on, the kitchen they eat in, me, Shirley, the foundation of this damn family. For the first time in years, I felt something stir, something strong, not anger, not revenge, just awareness. I mattered, I always had, and I wasn't going to let them treat me like air anymore. The folder lay on my lap like it weighed 100 pounds. George's signature, bold and blue, sat neatly on the dotted line. Mine was still blank. After all these years, the house was still in my name. The land, the walls, the very table they ate at, it all belonged to me. I stared at it, stunned, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. But not by them, by George, by the man who once told me, "If they don't respect you in this house, Shirley, they don't deserve a single brick of it." I closed the folder, slid it into the bottom drawer of my nightstand, and locked it. That night I couldn't sleep. The coffee burn on my leg still throbbed. The insult still echoed, rotting burden. I needed to do something, anything that reminded me I still existed. So I reached for an old notebook, one I hadn't touched since George passed. The cover was cracked and dusty, but the pages were blank, until now. I turned to the first page and wrote in shaky, careful letters what they said to me, day 1, 8:07 a.m. Victoria, you eat, you breathe, but you're just a rotting burden. Action, slammed coffee cup on floor. Liquid burned right ankle. No apology given. 8:10 a.m. Attempted to clean. Victoria took rag from me, said, someone useful will do it. 8:12 a.m. Robert entered. No reaction to spilled coffee or burn. Continued eating, whispered, just eat. I stared at the words, reading them back. Seeing them on paper made them real, undeniable. That night, I sat at the dinner table again. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Robert asked me to pass the salt. Victoria rolled her eyes when I dropped the spoon. I smiled politely, then wrote everything down later. 7:21 p.m. Victoria to Robert. She could at least be useful if she's going to sit around all day. Robert, no response. Each day I wrote more. The notebook became my quiet scream, a place where I still had a voice. They didn't know, they didn't care, but I knew, and that was enough, for now. One afternoon I was folding laundry in the hallway. The bedroom door was cracked open. I heard Victoria's voice before I realized she was on the phone. I froze. She just exists, like this ghost floating around the house. I swear if I have to look at her sunken face one more time, I'll lose it. She just drains everything. The words didn't hurt like they used to. They confirmed something. She didn't just dislike me. She wanted me gone. I stepped back from the door, quiet as a breath, then went to my room and wrote every word down. I underlined ghost. That night at dinner, Robert asked if I'd made peach cobbler. I didn't, I said. His brows lifted. But it's Wednesday. You always make it on Wednesday. Not anymore. I didn't say it angrily, just final. I watched his face crumple in confusion, maybe even guilt. But I didn't offer an explanation. Let them wonder. Back in my room, I opened the folder again, ran my fingers over the edge of the deed. Thought of all the times I'd given up pieces of myself for the people downstairs, meals, holidays, years. And what did I become in return? A burden, a background shadow, no more. I turned to the back of the notebook and made a list. 1. Call Mr. Richard Smith. 2. Ask about property rights. 3. Find out what I can do. Quietly, I remembered Mr. Smith well. George trusted him. A lawyer who sent us Christmas cards even after retirement. I dialed the number I found scribbled in an old phone book. Smith Legal Services, a young woman answered. This is Shirley Collins, I said, steady and clear. Tell Mr. Smith I need to schedule a private meeting. She paused. Of course, Mrs. Collins. I'll let him know right away. When I hung up, I didn't feel scared. I felt like the ground beneath this house was shifting, and they didn't even know it yet. The next morning, I put on my nicest blouse, the pale blue one with the tiny flower buttons George used to call my Sunday strength shirt. I hadn't worn it in years, not since his funeral. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Victoria was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. Robert was outside, watering the plants I once kept alive. Neither of them looked up when I walked past, but I noticed something different in my stride. Less dragging, more deliberate. The taxi driver was kind. He helped me into the seat, asked if I needed to stop for coffee. I declined. I was done drinking things that burned. Mr. Richard Smith's office was on the 3rd floor of a quiet brick building in town. unchanged since the last time George and I visited together, 20 years ago. When I walked in, the receptionist's eyes widened. "Mrs. Collins? Mr. Smith said to bring you in as soon as you arrived." I followed her into the office. Mr. Smith stood as I entered. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes were still sharp, still honest. "Shirley," he said, taking my hand gently, "it's been too long." "It has," I replied, managing a small smile. "But I believe George left me something important. I'm ready to use it." We sat. I placed the folder on his desk and opened it to the deed, the transfer draft, the unsigned line under my name. He read in silence. Then he looked up, surprised but impressed. "Shirley, this means you still legally own the entire property, the land, the house, everything." I nodded. "I assumed as much, but I needed to be sure." "You never signed the transfer," he said, "which means your authority remains absolute. You can live here, sell it, gift it, even turn it over to someone else entirely." His words wrapped around me like a shield. Power, clarity, protection. I leaned back in my chair. "I don't want to live there anymore," I said quietly. "Not with people who don't see me, but I also don't want them to have it. This house was built with love, not contempt." Mr. Smith nodded, understanding blooming in his expression. "There's a nature preservation trust that's been active in your county," he said. "They work to conserve family lands. They'd be very interested in this property, especially with that spring-fed creek on the back lot." I blinked. George used to say that creek could sing. He always wanted to keep this place green. He smiled. "Then let's see if we can honor that." He made a call, arranged a meeting. By the end of the hour, a representative from the Tennessee Land Conservation Trust was scheduled to visit me the following week. Before I left, Mr. Smith slid a new folder across the table. "This is a draft letter of intent. If you're satisfied after the visit, you can sign it. Nothing's official yet. You're still in control?" "Thank you," I said, standing slowly, "for treating me like I matter." He bowed his head. "You always did." Outside, I walked a little taller. I passed the same cafe where George used to buy me blueberry muffins. I didn't stop, but I smiled at the memory. Back at the house, I entered quietly. Victoria was arguing with someone on the phone. Robert was still in the backyard. I went to my room and locked the door. That night, I wrote again in my notebook. 3:45 p.m. Met with Mr. Smith. Confirmed I am sole legal owner of house and land. Began process to protect property from further disrespect. Then I added something new. 4:10 p.m. For the first time in years, I felt like this house had a voice again, and it was mine. The next morning, I moved through the house like a stranger in a museum, quiet, unnoticed, carefully avoiding the living exhibits that once called me family. Victoria didn't speak to me. Robert passed me in the hallway without eye contact. I had become something they had learned to walk around, like an old stain on the floor. But that was fine. Let them ignore me. I had business to attend to. That afternoon, a woman named Amanda from the Land Conservation Trust came by. I met her at the edge of the driveway, away from prying eyes and cruel mouths. She was kind, young but thoughtful. She shook my hand with both of hers and said, "I've heard about this property. Everyone says it's beautiful." I nodded. My husband built every inch of it. With love, we walked around the back, down the slope where the grass still grew wild and soft. I pointed out the peach trees we planted after Robert was born, the rocks George painted with Robert when he was 6, the quiet creek that still sang when the wind hit it right. Amanda took notes, smiled a lot. She said she could feel the heart in the place. Would you really consider transferring it to the trust? She asked. I looked out at the hill, golden in the afternoon sun. I'm not sure yet, I lied. But I want to know my options. When she left, I walked back inside, just in time to hear something I was never supposed to hear. Victoria's voice echoed down the hallway. She was on the phone again, loud, irritated, venom dripping from every word. I swear she just drifts through the house like some haunted statue. I can't even eat without wanting to scream. She's like mold you can't scrub out. There was silence, then laughter, her laughter. Then, Robert? Oh, he's hopeless, scared of her, scared of me. I told him either she goes or I do. Hell, I'd rather clean up after a dog than deal with her one more damn day. My body locked in place. I wasn't shocked, not really. But I was still crushed, not because she hated me. That much was obvious, but because of how easily she said it. How casually she tossed me below a dog. I backed away slowly, afraid even the floorboards might betray the heartbreak beneath my steps. In my room, I shut the door without a sound. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the wall, the burn on my ankle, the locked drawer holding the folder. My fingers twitched toward it. Instead, I reached for my notebook. 3:56 p.m. Heard Victoria say, I'd rather clean up after a dog than deal with her. Called me haunted statue, mold, and hopeless burden. No sign of regret, intent clear, she wants me gone. I closed the notebook and sat back, hands resting on my knees. George's photo smiled at me from the nightstand, his flannel shirt, his kind eyes, the way he used to listen. If they don't respect you, he once said, don't let them inherit what you built. I stood up, walked to the dresser, pulled out the folder. This time, my hand didn't shake when I opened it. That night, I packed slowly. Not everything, just the things that mattered. A pair of shoes, my Bible, George's old handkerchief, the photo of Robert as a toddler wearing oversized sunglasses, and the notebook. Everything else could rot with their silence. I placed the suitcase under the bed, then I sat down and wrote one more line in my notebook. 9:34 p.m. I'm done being the ghost in this house. I'm done being beneath the dog. They don't know it yet, but I've already left them. 3 days after hearing Victoria compare me to a dog, I walked into Mr. Smith's office wearing black, not for mourning, but for resolve. The draft letter of intent was on the desk, crisp and final. George's name was already on the deed. Mine was the only one missing. Mr. Smith looked at me with quiet respect. Once you sign this, the trust will have legal assurance. You'll still own the house, for now. But this gives you control over its future, not them. I took the pen. My fingers no longer shook. I didn't sign with bitterness. I signed with clarity. Each stroke of my name was a goodbye. To the idea that loyalty means silence. To the dream that blood always means love. To the woman who spent decades feeding mouths that would spit on her in return. When it was done, Mr. Smith looked at me and said, "This may be the most powerful thing you've ever done." I nodded. They think they've buried me, but they forgot who built the ground they're standing on. As I left, I saw a flyer pinned to the office board. Backbone Women, for those who gave everything and were forgotten. I tore off the number and placed it in my pocket. Not for today, but for when I'm ready to speak, loudly. Back home, I returned to my performance. The ghost, the shadow, the polite nothing. At dinner, Robert asked if I'd washed his shirt for tomorrow. I didn't even look up. No, he blinked. Why not? I didn't feel like doing chores for people who step over me. Silence. Victoria scoffed. Oh, we're doing the guilt trip again? No, I said, meeting her eyes. Just stating the new rules. She rolled her eyes and turned away, muttering, God, dramatic as ever. I smiled, because that night I started packing. Only what mattered: a photo of George, my notebook, my signed documents, a clean coat, a single pair of shoes. The house was still full of noise, but none of it was directed at me. I was just there, like wallpaper, but I was listening. And then, late into the night, I heard what I knew would come eventually. Victoria, loud on the phone, pacing the hallway, her voice soaked in disgust. I swear if she drops dead, I'd sleep better. That old bat just breathes and whines and soaks up heat and space. She gave birth to Robert, so what? He turned out to be a coward who still calls her mom like a baby. Pause, laughter, more venom. I should be the one on that deed, me, not some ghost dragging slippers across my floor. I froze, not from shock, from finality, because that was the moment I realized they didn't just disrespect me, they had erased me. In their eyes, I was no longer a mother, not even a human being, just a ghost with a name they wanted off the property. I sat down, opened my notebook, wrote, 10:04 p.m. Victoria. If she drops dead, I'd sleep better. Robert. Called me a coward, said I should be replaced. Then I wrote, underlined, this is the moment I buried every last piece of hope. I zipped my suitcase, placed it beside the door. I didn't cry, I didn't tremble, I simply moved. In the early hours before dawn, I dressed quietly, wrote a short note, just 3 words, and left it on the kitchen counter. You'll understand soon. Then I sat by the front window, my packed bag at my feet, the moonlight reflecting. Off the tile that once burned my ankle, tomorrow they'd wake up to silence. No footsteps, no coffee made, no mother. And they wouldn't realize until too late. They hadn't just lost me, they'd lost everything. I woke before the alarm and 4:30 a.m. The house was still, the silence heavier than usual. I moved like fog, soft, cold, certain. I slipped on my coat, tied my scarf, and picked up my bag. It was light, but it held everything I still claimed as mine. My name, my past, and now, finally, my freedom. I paused at the top of the stairs and looked down. So many nights I'd stood here waiting for Robert to come home, or for Victoria to call me down for help. So many meals, so many sacrifices, none of them remembered, not even once. I stepped down slowly, each creaking stair reminding me that I had once belonged here. Once, but not anymore. On the kitchen counter, my note waited silently. You'll understand soon. The taxi pulled up quietly. I didn't look back. The driver didn't ask questions. He glanced at me through the mirror once, saw something in my face, and simply drove. We left the street behind, left the house, the porch light still on, the curtains still closed. They wouldn't know I was gone until the kettle boiled and no one came, until their coffee tasted bitter and no one explained why. I watched Tennessee's hills roll past the window like waves. The sky hadn't turned pink yet, but I felt it coming. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Barbara Davis opened the door in a fuzzy robe and wide eyes. Shirley, I know it's early. Her eyes filled with something that wasn't pity. It was recognition. No, she said softly, pulling me into a hug. It's right on time. She brewed tea, real tea. Not that flavorless kind Victoria kept for show. We sat on the porch as the sun began to rise. I don't want to talk about it, I said. You don't have to, Barbara replied. We sat in silence, and for the first time in years, it was the kind of silence that healed. Later that morning, I called Mr. Smith. "It's done," I said. "I've left the house." His voice was steady. "Then I'll release the letter of intent to the trust. It'll trigger the formal transfer. I'll handle everything." "Thank you," I whispered. "Make sure they receive notice properly." He paused. "May I ask what you left behind?" I thought for a second. My silence. That afternoon, while I rested in the spare room Barbara prepared for me, I received an email from the trust. They confirmed everything: the land, the home, the spring-fed creek, all would be protected, untouchable. No one could claim it now, not even Robert. I read it twice, and then I allowed myself to cry, not because I was sad, but because for the first time, the crying wasn't for someone else. It was for me. Back at the house, I imagined what might be happening. Robert waking up to an empty hallway, no footsteps, no kettle boiling. Victoria storming down in her robe, shouting, "Where is she?" Finding the note, the silence, the echo of absence. Then the doorbell ringing, a legal envelope in hand. "You have 48 hours to vacate. This property has been legally transferred to the Tennessee Land Conservation Trust." I pictured Victoria screaming, Robert frozen, their confusion, their shame. But I wasn't there to witness it, because justice doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it only needs truth and timing. That night, as the stars blinked above a new roof, I wrote in my notebook, "June 13th, I left the house. I didn't run. I walked. I didn't beg. I signed. I didn't scream. I planned. They'll never call me a burden again, because now they have nothing to feed on." I closed the book, took a deep breath, and slept. Not because I was tired, but because I was finally safe. 2 days after I left, they came for what was never theirs. A black SUV parked outside the house I once called home. Inside were 2 uniformed officers and a representative from the Tennessee Land Conservation Trust. In their hands, a legal envelope, a clipboard, and the power to end the farce. The door creaked open. Victoria appeared in her silk robe, holding a coffee mug like a shield. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the strangers. Robert trailed behind, still in his slippers, looking like a man who'd just lost something but didn't know what yet. "Can I help you?" Victoria snapped, defensive by default. The trust agent replied with professional calm. "We're here to inform you that this property has been formally transferred to the Tennessee Land Conservation Trust. You are now trespassing." "Trespassing?" She laughed harshly. "That's rich. This is my house." The officer stepped forward. "Actually, ma'am, it has never legally belonged to you. Mrs. Shirley Collins remains the only verified owner and has executed a full conservation transfer. You have 48 hours to vacate." Victoria's mouth fell open. "You've got to be kidding. Robert, tell them this is a mistake." Robert's voice was barely audible. I didn't realize. She never signed it over." "You mean we lived here all this time and she still owned it?" Victoria hissed. "Yes," I said. They turned toward the voice, and there I was, standing at the foot of the driveway, wearing George's old coat, holding the final copy of the deed in my gloved hand. "You planned this," Victoria seethed, "behind our backs, like a coward." I walked up, slowly and without fear. "Number, I planned it right in front of you. You just never thought I had the strength." "You backstabbing witch!" I raised one hand, calm, steady. "Don't waste your breath, Victoria. I've heard worse. From you." Robert's voice cracked. "Mom, please, don't call me that," I said. He winced. I looked at them both, 2 people who had taken and never once looked back to see who was bleeding. "I cooked for you, cleaned for you, sat silently as you rolled your eyes, slammed your dishes, called me a ghost, a burden, even a rotting shell. And you, I turned to Robert. You stood by. Not once did you say, stop. Not once did you say, she matters. Victoria scoffed. So this is revenge? I shook my head. Number revenge is loud. This is correction. The trust agent stepped forward and handed them the envelope. These are the official documents. You must vacate within 48 hours. After that, the property becomes restricted land, protected by state law. You may not reside here. You may not sell. You may not change a single nail. Victoria's voice broke into a shriek. You can't do this to us. I looked her square in the eyes. I didn't do this to you. You did this through me. Robert finally raised his head. His eyes were red. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. And yet you did, I said quietly. With every silence, with every time you let her speak for both of you. I held up the deed. The name on it gleamed under the winter sun. This house was never yours. It was mine. Yours only by my kindness. And when that kindness ran out, so did your right to stay. I turned, walked a few steps, then paused at the porch, one last glance back. You said I was in the way, I said, voice calm and final. But you were wrong. I turned fully to face them. I was never in your way. I was the foundation. And then I walked away, not like a woman who lost her family, but like a woman who finally reclaimed herself. It's been 3 weeks, 3 quiet, extraordinary, unspeakably peaceful weeks. I now live in a guest room at Barbara's, nothing fancy, just a soft bed, a lamp with a warm yellow glow, and a window that opens toward her garden. The roses out there shouldn't be blooming this time of year, but they are. Defiant little things. Like me. Barbara told me the flowers were stubborn. Just like you, she said with a smile. I didn't deny it. Every morning I wake up early. No one expects breakfast. No one sighs when I walk into a room. I brew tea just the way I like it, slice apples the way George used to enjoy, and eat them alone on the porch, not out of sadness, but out of choice. Freedom has a quiet flavor I never knew I'd come to crave. Barbara doesn't hover. She doesn't check in. She simply lets me exist. And that's a gift no one in that old house ever thought to offer me. Last week I received a letter, cream envelope, heavy stock paper, embossed seal. It was from the Land Conservation Trust. Transfer finalized. Parcel 304B registered under Legacy Preservation. Name on record, Shirley Collins. I stared at the letter for a long time, not because I didn't understand it, but because it had been years since my name meant anything in a document that mattered. I folded the letter carefully, placed it into a small wooden box George made decades ago, and whispered to myself, they thought I had nothing left, but they forgot who built it all. Not out of spite, but out of truth, out of clarity. On Sunday, I passed by the church bulletin board. Same flyer I'd seen before, Backbone Women, for those who gave everything and were forgotten. This time, I didn't hesitate. I dialed the number. The group meets every Friday evening, in a small basement room with plastic chairs and bad coffee. But the women there, oh, the women, strong, quiet, broken in places, healing in others. Each one carried a story, like mine, wrapped in different names but marked with the same bruises. One woman said, my daughter made me eat in the garage, said the house didn't have room for the elderly. Another whispered, after 41 years of marriage, my son sold my home without telling me. Said I was better off in a facility. We didn't cry, we nodded, because pain, when shared in a circle of truth, becomes lighter. When it was my turn, I simply said, I left. I gave away the house. but I kept my dignity, and that, I realized, is worth more than walls. There was a pause. Then came the clapping, not loud, not pitiful, just right. The kind that says, "We see you. You're not invisible anymore." This morning, Barbara found me kneeling in the garden, hands in the soil, replanting a tomato vine knocked over by the wind. "You're up early," she said. I smiled. Felt like growing something. She handed me a new trellis stake. "You always did have a talent for building things up." We worked in silence, side by side, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt. Later that night, I opened my old notebook. I flipped past the dark days, the coffee burn, the slammed doors, the whispered insults that echoed for years. And on a new, fresh page, I wrote, "July 4th, I didn't reclaim the house. I reclaimed myself. The land is protected, and so am I. Maybe not by fences, but by choice, by courage, by the truth of who I am." I closed the book, and for the first time in decades, I slept with the door open, because I'm not afraid anymore, not of being alone, not of being forgotten, and certainly not of being free. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own home? If Shirley's story echoes even a little part of your life, know this: you are not alone. We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Whether whispered or shouted, it matters. Because stories like yours and Shirley's are what help us heal. Don't forget to subscribe for more family drama stories that speak the truth. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard, always.